Hi, this is Christian. Welcome to Angular. In this video, let's talk about template-driven forms in Angular. So before we go and do the code, I'm going to go over some information about the driven form here. So I highlighted here the yellow. It says the source of truth, or sometimes referred to as the single source of truth, is the template or the DOM. The single source of truth is really just the form data itself, right? Where do they live? So in the template-driven form, the data are stored or maintained in the DOM, the actual template here. On the left side is the DOM or the template. On the right side is the source or the code in the Angular. So you see that you can pass data out to the form, of course, but then data cannot come back, right, automatically. So to get the data from the template, you have to do a couple of ways. One is, of course, you can use the famous data binding, or two, you can fetch the form through the form submission process. You get the event object from the form, just like the typical way of you handle forms. Or three, you go through a ng form module that can have direct access to the form content as well. But that's if you are doing a binding and so on. Another way is, well, of course, I think those are the major three ways. Okay, so that is the how you access data from the form. So the takeaway is that the source of truth is in the form, and in the source you don't have access to the controls in the form, okay, or the data directly. And down here, just another code snippet of what my form will look like. You see that in the form here, I have a form tag that gives it a name. This name here is bound to the ng form. It just tells Angular that this form is now watched or managed by Angular, so that you can have some like validation process going on too. Okay, so the reason why you use ID is because you might have a couple of forms on the same page, and you need to know which form is which, right? So that gives that a unique ID. And then you would do the ng submit, you bind to that. So when you submit the form, when I click the button down here, it's going to send the data over to a function called handle submit, or whatever function you want to call there. And then notice I pass in a flight form. Okay, this variable here is the name of this form here. So if you have another form, you can pass in a different variable name, right? Of course, that can be done, but usually you want to pass the form here to this function to handle it. Okay, so and that's how you get all the data, because again, you don't have direct access to it unless you submit it. All right, so let's go and see how you can design something like this in Visual Studio Code. So here in the Angular app, my app is already running, and let me show you what that looks like. So here I added two links to the navigation, the template-driven and the reactive. So the template-driven, we're going to have a really simple form that takes a name, username, email. We're going to add that to a list, and we can also reset the data too, of course. And then on the right side, just basically we're displaying what we typed so far, and maybe you put like a list or a paragraph to show the data here when we retrieve the form data. Okay. So in here, in my components, I have the template-driven form right here, and the source. So there's nothing in the source yet, but in the form, I pretty much put out the skeleton there so you can kind of move on really quickly. I have just the basic form structure. I didn't put any data, anything in there at all. I put some CSS, of course, just to make the form look nice and so on. So we have the input tag here, the input for the username, first name, username, the email, and I have a button to submit and a button to reset. Okay, so reset, just your typical forms reset and stuff. So when you click submit, it's going to send everything all at once to the form, and then we have to fetch that in the code. Okay, so let's add some changes to this form here to make it has some ng control. So the form tag here, you want to give it a name. In this case, as you can see, I have two forms, one here, and the second form, well, I don't have it, but you can add another form down here. And so just to make your form unique, and also for validation purposes. Okay, so here I put a name. The pound sign here looks very similar. If you're familiar with CSS, the pound sign gives a unique name, like the ID, right, of the form. And you can also give names, unique name to each of these input as well. And we'll see them a little bit later. But the form name here, I'll just call it F. It's very typical to call f because it's really short to type, and it only exists here in the template here. It does not, you know, you don't have access to this variable in the code anyway. So f, we give it a meaningful name, yeah, reg1 or something, and then equal, you bind that to the ng form. Okay, this is actually a directive called ng form directive. You don't see it here. I don't do it manually here. I mean, you don't do any imports in here as well. It manages automatically by Angular. As soon as you put this in the form, it invokes the ng directive. And so now this is Angular form, and then when you submit, we want to bind to the ng submit as well, right? And that's going to be assigned to a function called maybe on submit, or you call it handle submit, whatever function you want to call. And in here, I want to pass all this form data because these are all tied to this function or this variable called f. Okay, so I put f here. Okay, if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to access all this data, and you can use a different method. But for now, I want to show you the f first. And the neat thing about this, you'll see in a minute, is that everything here comes in the exact order, because the order is important. If you want to do a direct transfer from data from the form to an object in the code, that's important. Otherwise, you can still fetch these objects, these fields manually. So that is for that part. And then the input here. So we need to bind this data, right, to the value. To get the value, you have to have bind it to the value. So let's do it here, and you do a just the value is bound to nothing. So nothing is in the form. So I'm not binding any data to the source at all, right? I don't have to. You can, but you don't have to. But you have to bind it so that when you submit the form, these data will be transferred over to the f to receive that. If you don't do that, you're not going to receive the data. Okay, and they also make this field required. Right. You can also put other validations, like for example, you can have like minimum length, maximum length, and so on. So min length. Let's just say that you know, 2 characters, and max length would be whatever, right? You can see you have to put that declaratively or explicitly here in your controls. Otherwise, it won't work, right? So let me just copy this and copy it and put it down here to the username as well. Okay, also required. The email may be the same. So let's just say all of them have requirements of 2 minimum characters or more. Okay, and then down here at this submit button, I'm not doing anything here, which is pretty much that's it, right? So if I save this and go back to my form, and if I type in something, let me just reload it just in case if it's working. Type in something here. If I click reset, it resets the form. Okay, so now when I click something, it's going to go and code the function and fetch the data in the code. So let's go to the template component now, and then now we need to create a few things in here. So I have to create a function called onSubmit. Remember, this function takes an argument, right? It takes an argument. So we pass in the f here. Now the f is, what type is it? It's an ng form type. Okay, if you were to pass an event, you put here the $ event. That's your regular typical DOM event, right? But in this case, I'm passing the f as an ng form. So therefore, over here, I have to put like, I can use the same variable name if I want to. Any variable name doesn't matter. And it's typical to assign that to, say, ng with capital N form. Okay, so you do that, it will import this automatically to your app here, your code here. Okay, and so now it's of type ng form, and because of ng form now I can access all the data here. So for now, I'm going to create another object here, and this is going to be used to store my users information. So I can say users equal just a blank list, right? But as soon as I receive the data, I'm going to add that new user or information to the users list in here. So I will say this users dot push. I'm going to push the f value to it. So the value here stores all the form elements in a key value pair. Okay, and that's the neat thing about it. In that order you have in the form. So the first thing is going to be, you know, the name, whatever name you give. In this case, it would be just name, and then the value, the name, the value. It comes in that pair, and also, so we can see that in the code very nicely. In the same time, I'm going to also console log this. You can see what's it like. You can put F. You have more information, and we'll see. So let's save this, and then now over here on the right side, the right box, I'm going to change this to do a loop. Maybe we'll put a loop through each paragraph. So we'll say each ng4 let user of users, and also I'm going to use the index as I, and I also print the index as well. So here I will put the index, and it's going to be 0, so I'm going to put +1. The first person is going to be the name, right? So we have the user.name, and then maybe their user.username, and then finally the email. So you print the data here to the list as well. Okay, let's save this, and let's see if it works. All right, so here we go. If I click add, you see that it has no data, right? If I go and put some name, like Joe Black, and JB at jb.com. Okay. All right, so it didn't register here, but we'll see why. But I want to show the F12 key. Press F12 and see what comes in. Okay, so you look over here, you see that the first time I submit is this one. This is the second time I submit. It comes in as an ng form. If you expand that, you see that the form, the F, right, comes in, has all this information here. And this is part of the Angular object. So inside here, we have the value. If you click at the value here, you see that it's an object. Expand that. And so somehow we didn't have the data. Okay, I didn't do something correctly in the form. So nothing comes through. But this is what the F means when it comes through. ng form has all the information. You retrieve the data inside this value object. And you can see that there's a lot of other options as well. When you do validations, you go through the errors here. You check for the errors, see any errors, if the form has been touched or not, right? And so on. So let's go and fix the error here. It doesn't work. That means I might forget something in the form here. Yeah, I did assign the value, but I forgot to bind it through the ng model. Okay, so I need you to do one thing here, is you need to add the ng model here. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, put it everywhere else. Otherwise, it won't go through. So I should say you require two things. So usually, well, actually three things, right? So usually you need the name, the you bind to the value. If you would do one-way, just one-way binding here. Well, in this case, it'd be two-way binding. But we're not binding to any property. You're just binding to make this an ng model. So you need the name, the value here, and then the ng model. Okay, so I think that's all I need here. So let's save that, and let's go and try again. Okay, let me clear my console. Now let's try. I just hit enter. Nothing comes through. It's blank. If I expand this again, you see in the values, now they have those three name, username, and email in that order, right? It fetches that and gets out automatically from the form field. So now let's put some information here again. Joe Black, JB at jb.bj.com, doesn't matter. I hit add. Now here it comes, the first name, the username, and the email. And so now let me open the second one. This one here now. Answer inside the value. You have three fields: name, username, email. Pretty neat, huh? So it comes in here. And note that I transfer everything automatically to this list using the f.value. So all these fields, this is an object, right? So it's an object. That means it transferred very nicely to our object over here. So it comes in the key value pair automatically without having to fetching any data manually. So you can see how powerful this can be. So that's one way to fetch the data directly from your form to an object like this. And of course, if you want to fetch every data field manually, you can through this f.view value. So if you want to get like just the first name or something, you would do something like f.value dot name. Right? So these are the actual fields over here. Whatever you call these, the name will give you that, dot username give you that, email gives you that. So pretty neat. So if I do that now, you see that if I print it again, I only get the first name being displayed on the browser here on the control. So I put like Jake, Lynn, whatever, JL at jl.com, and add, you see that it prints the first name here. Okay, so very, very neat when you use the ng form to help you get all this data.